I do believe that it's immaterial, so I guess we could talk about that. No, that's not cringe. You wanna... Do you have an argument, or should I start with mine?
Yeah, I do have an argument. I don't know. It just seems like there's evidence that sets the precedent that the mind is material from what we can observe from what history has shown us. There's some very famous examples, such as the case of Phineas Gage. If you're familiar with lobotomies, you know what this is. Essentially, Phineas Gage was a person who was struck through the head with an iron rod, which essentially performed a lobotomy on him. And this event actually changed a lot about him in terms of his personality, in terms of his morality. A lot of things that we would consider to be attributes of the mind or attributes of our conscious experience, which is linked to the mind. So after Phineas Gage was lobotomized, and this is true of a lot of lobotomy patients, his shame levels, which has to do with his morality and personality, went down so much that he practically felt no shame whatsoever. And it's through these kinds of extreme examples that we can come to the determination that there is evidence that the mind, or what we would call the mind, is actually something physical.
Okay, so can you just define the mind for me? And after that, I'll get into the arguments and points you made.
Well, my definition of the mind might be a bit different from your definition, but my understanding of what the mind is that what we call the mind is actually a series of processes that the brain undergoes, which, develop certain attributes of ours, such as our personality, our morality, and things of that nature.
Okay. So so in your worldview, would you say that a mental state is identical to a brain state?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Okay. So brain states are one-to-one with mental states, okay. And what are the... Yeah, how would you describe these processes to the best of your ability? Is it just the non tangible thinking processes that the mind goes through?
Yeah, so I feel like we could compare it to hardware and software, or maybe just hardware. I guess we'll see where the analogy goes, but I think of it similarly to a computer. A computer has certain codes, and this code is meant to be responsive. It's supposed to respond to stimuli. So when we have the hardware of a computer and we input a certain action, such as, copy and pasting, it reacts to those things in a designated manner based upon its code. I essentially think that the brain works a very similar way, in which we are designed to respond to stimuli in certain ways. And I guess you could say that we develop a form of software similar to a computer, wherein within the hardware of our brain, we develop as people based on our experiences, and that evolves and changes how we respond to things. So there's the software and hardware elements. That's what I would compare it to give an understanding of what it is.
Okay. So there's one thing, I'm trying to look at your argument in an overarching way. One thing that I'm failing to see is why this dependency between your mental states and brain states, such as your brain is getting affected through a lobotomy. We know what it means. Your brain gets affected physically. That changing the mind itself, I don't understand why this dependency entails them being identical in substance.
Well, it's evidence for it. So when you say entail, I want to make it very clear that I don't think it's necessarily the case. I don't think that there's a contradiction in saying that the brain state and mind state are not one-to-one based off of this evidence. All I'm saying is that based on what we're observing, there are attributes that correspond with the mind to our understanding, such as personality, such as empathy, such as morality, which can be altered based upon physical things such as lobotomies. And the evidence is that if physical events can change what we take to be mental attributes, then it's evidence for the fact that the mind is material, and what the mind really is are just a series of processes that the brain carries out.
Okay, so you just okay, don't get me wrong. Did you say that you think that mental states and brain states don't necessarily have to be identical? There's no contradiction in that.
Yeah, I don't think it would be contradictory.
Yeah, okay, I just had to get that out of the way, because that's
Can I give you an example as to why I don't think it would be contradictory?
Oh, no. I'm fine with them not being contradictory. I think that's really intuitive.
I just like to just really quickly kind of establish more so what I mean by that. There's a philosophy called substance dualism, in which essentially the theory is that the brain and the mind are separate entities, but they're actually just in synchronicity. Like they're not interacting with each other in actuality; they're just synchronized. And the best way that this
Wait,
is
that's not true.
illustrated, the best way that
No,
this is
that's you're talking about life
illustrated.
instant view. No, Rene
Oh
Descartes
my
agrees.
goodness,
No, Rene
Wait,
Descartes.
Apollo, we're debating.
Relax. So the example commonly given for this, or at least the example I've heard commonly given for this, is that if you put two clocks on the wall and you start them off at the same time, they're always going to reflect one another, even if they're not technically connected. So to that extent, I would say there's a possibility that the brain and the mind are one-to-one in a synchronized sense, but not in a sense that they're literally the same. I just think that what I displayed was evidence for the fact that they are kind of one-to-one.
Okay, yeah, okay. So far, this is what I have for your argument. We have a list of evidence, or list of evidences throughout fiction. I mean, history. Those were the lobotomies and etc. that you mentioned. From these, we derive changing the brain or altering it would entail changing the mind. And then we have the computer analogy, and then we were talking about like how there's no contradiction in them not being like one-to-one brain states and mental states. Yeah, so I'm gonna give like my first main contention. I think just the mere possibility of the brain and the brain states and mental states not being identical literally just proves that they're completely distinct. Because if you have something that is identical to something, then that has to be through logical necessity. There's a law of identity. If there's a possible world in which this is not the case, then these two things are not true of the same propositions. If it is true that the brain is like X, but it's not identical to the mind, then we cannot derive this through some form of like identity inference that it would also be true of the mind. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I just don't think it applies. So what I'm ultimately trying to say is that I don't know, right? I'm not necessarily speaking on logical possibility so much as I'm speaking on epistemological possibility, in that I'm just remarking on the fact that I don't know for certain, right, if the brain is the mind. I don't know 100%. When I say I can't point out a contradiction, I'm saying that I can't, strictly, as in it's possible that it's there's some kind of proof that they are distinct things. What you just brought up, where, you know, the law of identity states that everything is itself, right? That's true. But if we're trying to figure out what something is and we don't have a surefire way or of making a deductive argument that it must necessarily be that thing, all we can really rely on is our induction and what seems most evident to us at this current time. The only concessions I'm making to you is that I'm granting that it's possible our understanding evolves and that our knowledge expands, and later in the future we find more evidence to support your position. But all I'm saying right now is logically it's possible that you're right, but the evidence that I have inductively seems to go in the other direction, right?
I think I get what you're getting at. There's only one issue in that argument, and that is just the fact that our knowledge is. I don't think our knowledge is ever going to like. I mean, okay, let me just like start us like square one. Deduction goes from premise, necessarily entail conclusion. Necessity itself means that if the premises are true, and this is what it means for an argument to be valid. If the premises are true, then the conclusion has to necessarily follow. I don't think we're ever going to reach the point where if we accept the premises that you put forth in your argument, what kind of premises, such as there being no contradiction, and the possibility of them being different, and tells them they are not identical, and therefore they do not mesh one-to-one, I think that actually puts like a deductive evidence on my side of the argument, and you granting that's how the law of identity works and etc., granting the idea of identity inferences, I think that just tips the weight to my side, tips the scales. I mean,
I don't think so. I'm only saying that it's possible that that the mind isn't the brain, right? I'm not saying that there's like whether or not the mind is the brain, obviously the law of identity will apply. I'm just saying that I don't think we have access to the information yet to say deductively necessarily that it is. And you know, you brought up knowledge, you brought up like the kind of the problem with our knowledge that we can never have 100% certainty. That's true to an extent, but I think it's especially true when it comes to things like the mind or consciousness. I think that what these things are and how specifically they function, I think is highly mysterious to us. I don't think we have nearly as much information right now as we possibly could. that's why I'm making more of a soft claim that inductively it seems this way to me, not necessarily. I would ask you a question to kind of illustrate like my point here. Let's say that you're opening a series of doors, right? And behind the door, there can either be a rectangle or a triangle. Um, You've opened 9 doors out of 10, and there's been a triangle, but you haven't opened the last door yet. What you would probably say, right, is that based upon the information that you've gathered thus far, it seems like there's a pattern of opening a door and there's a triangle behind it. So when you open the 10th door, there's evidence to suggest there would be a triangle behind it. Acknowledging the possibility that there could be a rectangle behind it doesn't negate the fact that the evidence seems to fall in the opposite direction, that there will be a triangle. Do you follow, or do you have like a problem with that?
No, no, no. I understand what you're saying. That's like standard induction. I don't deny induction. I just believe that the way your argument applies the induction is kind of like I don't want to make it sound weird, so I'm just gonna try to keep it simple. But I think you're just misusing how induction works. What you're drawing an induction for is mental states being affected by brain states, and you granting the idea that they could be different. That just means that I can deduce that they would be different because that would be that's basically an identity inference.
And but even linguistically, you're kind of contradicting yourself. When you say they could be different, therefore they would be different. When you say would, linguistically, when we say something would be the case, we're saying that it will be the case sort of in that scenario. Like, if it were the case that, chugging down 50 cups of coffee in an hour would kill you of cardiac arrest, then we would say that it would do that. As in, if you did those things, if you satisfied those requirements, that would happen. If you only say it could, then you're acknowledging that, no, there's a possibility that you wouldn't die. So we wouldn't make the claim that, because it's possible you could. We wouldn't make the claim that because it's possible you could die of drinking that much coffee. We wouldn't make the claim that necessarily you therefore will. So really, what we're operating with is an argument of what we're able to observe, and the evidence seems to be on my side. You critiquing that I don't have a deductive necessity argument, or saying that the possibility existing means that your side is supported. That really, there's no weight to it, I would say.
Okay. I feel like you're strawmanning my point a bit. I'm not saying that you not having a deductively valid argument is what really makes your argument not follow through. I'm just gonna repeat what I was saying. You're drawing an induction of something that is unrelated to the actual debate topic because there seems. I understand that you gave an analogy. I understand that we have different kind of experiments and stuff that seem to demonstrate something that might seem intuitive to someone, but if that's someone, like the very same person, grants the idea that they could be different, and I'm just gonna run over this argument again if you don't mind, because I think you're also misunderstanding it. The point of the argument is not saying that, because it's possible that it is this way. I'm saying that because it is possible that they are different, they cannot be identical to themselves. So brain states and mental states cannot be one-to-one. And if I've disproved the fact that they are one-to-one, that means brain states and mental states are not identical, meaning materialism fails. And this is my point. If there's a possible world in which they are not the same, then they are not logically identical.
I'm gonna nerd out for a minute. My apologies. When I say it's logically possible that brain states could not be mind states, I'm saying that it's epistemologically possible, not that it's ontologically possible. And to kind of turn down a little bit and kind of explain that in simpler terms, when I would say something is ontologically possible, we're dealing with the nature of reality, right? I don't think it's ontologically possible for the brain or the mind to be something that they're not. So if it is the case that the mind is separate from the brain, then it's ontologically impossible for it to be the brain. But if they are one and the same, then it's ontologically impossible for them to be distinct entities. I would grant that. What I'm saying the possibility lies in is that it's epistemologically possible, aka it's possible that knowledge-wise I have insufficient knowledge about the nature of these things, and so that's where the possibility of them being separate entities lies. But I don't think that there's a flaw in my argument just because I recognize the possibility of my knowledge being incomplete. I'm not making any kind of acknowledgement of the fact that ontologically it's possible that the brain or the mind aren't themselves, because obviously they are. It's just like a case of, okay, well, when the mind is itself, is that just short for it being the brain as well or not? That's what's in question, and that's something I don't have certainty over within the realm of my knowledge. I would also like to reiterate that I gave a few kind of examples earlier about like lobotomies and the kind of attributes that they affect. And I'm curious because you didn't have any like disagreements with the attributes I listed and whether or not they have to do with the mind. Would you consider attributes such as personality, ethics, and I guess shame levels or emotions,
Parts of the mind?
those kinds of things? Are those things that you would attribute to mental states?
Yeah, I would, but like what I was explaining is what I was trying to get at when you made that point. Wait, folks, wait. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying that because there's like some issue with your knowledge or like that there's some flaw in your knowledge. It's not certain. That is not the point that I was making about the first the inductive argument that you gave. I was trying to get at what you're drawing an induction for is there being a dependency between brain states and mental states. There is not establishing any form of evidence besides just maybe some kind of intuitive evidence, but I don't think that we should take
intuitive evidence. That's not intuitive evidence.
But what else would it be? Because we don't. Okay, your argument doesn't demonstrate.
When you say intuitive evidence, you're talking about. When you say intuitive evidence, you're essentially saying that it's evidence by virtue of it sounding right in your head or clicking in your head. That's not what I'm doing. I'm saying that there are attributes that we both agree are related to mental states, such as your shame levels, your emotions, your ethics, your personality, and I'm saying that these things can be directly affected by physical happenings, physical events that mess with your brain. And so if that's the case, that seems to be evidence that mental states that we refer to are actually processes in the brain that can be disrupted. If that's true, then these processes are actually physical. That's not an intuitive form of evidence. That's an inductive form of evidence. It doesn't seem like you're arguing against that. You're just kind of harping down on me saying that I guess it's possible that, we can have a further understanding of the brain and mind in the future that could contradict my position, but that's not any form of concession, really.
Okay. I don't think that I'm actually misunderstanding your argument. I think I got it actually pretty well. So this is what I see from the argument. There exists a causal relation between brain states and mental states. And you believe that this leads us to believe, and let me quote your wording, it seems to be the case that the mind and the brain are the same thing. Or, I mean, not the same thing, but the mental states and brain states match one-to-one.
That mental states, what we describe as mental states, are really just like these parasitic attributes that only exist as processes within the physical brain. Yes.
So then, okay, I'm not sure if I'm following with that now. So, are you trying to say that the mind itself is a separate entity, but it has to exist within like the physical one?
Okay, no. So like, hold on. Here would be a great example. So like, let's say that it's like how when we say that like there's red on an apple, we're not saying that the red of the apple is a separate existence. We're saying that the red is a component of the apple, a component of the way that light hits the apple. That's how mental states kind of function in reality.
Yeah, I feel you. Okay.
They're more so
you.
descriptions of processes of the brain rather than a separate entity.
Okay, but then it calls into question, why can this not imply like very simply that the brain itself and the mind themselves are just separate entities, but they still have a causal relation? I think this is why I mentioned this would be an intuitive argument. It doesn't actually establish any form of logical proof. It gives an inductive argument for the causal dependencies, but it doesn't give an argument for them being like physical.
If you're gonna argue that there's a possibility that the mind and brain are separate entities, but they have a causal relationship, I would ask you then, okay, well then based on the evidence we have, what is the mechanism for that causal relationship? Because in my worldview, right, the mechanism would quite literally be that the mind is just a product of processes of the brain. That's the mechanism, is that it's a product of those things. You seem to think they're separate but have a causal relationship. Based on the evidence you can provide, what is the mechanism for that relationship?
I don't believe that us as humans understand it yet. That's why it's so debated. But I don't think giving any explanation is better than having no explanation. And I think that your explanation fails to account for this identity relation, which is the only thing that's like actually relevant to this debate topic. I don't disagree with there being a causal relation. I think that's like really intuitive. Everyone can agree on that. But what I fail to understand in your argument and how the entailment's forming is where does... Okay, let me get this again. The mind is a series of processes that the brain undergoes.
Just to be clear, because I'm not sure I'm very clear on what you're doing, are you literally just trying to provide alternative possibilities?
No, I'm not just trying to provide alternate possibilities. I'm showing you why your argument doesn't give a definitive proof or any kind of proof as to why they are one-to-one.
I didn't claim it gave definitive proof. And
I said it could be like any kind of proof. Induction isn't meant to be definitive.
So hold on, do you agree I gave deductive proof? Not deductive, inductive. My apologies, inductive proof.
You made an attempt at giving inductive proof, but I don't think that it entails the conclusion of your argument. I believe that it's a weak induction fallacy.
When you say it doesn't entail it, that's induction isn't supposed to entail a specific like argument. Like when we use the word entail, like in our language like that, what we're referring to is deductive arguments. Deductive arguments entail a conclusion. Inductive arguments imply or suggest a conclusion. So your framing of it is setting yourself up.
Sure. Then sure. Then I can just change my wording, I guess. But I was using them kind of interchangeably. But still, the point that I'm making is that you giving proof inductively that this is the case, that there's this causal relation. I don't believe, based on what you provided, that this would be sufficient enough for me to arrive at the conclusion that, they have to be identical, because there are a bunch of worldviews. Don't ask me to name them, but I've read about them. There's a bunch of worldviews that follow kind of like different... Actually, I can get you some of them if you want, but they follow different ideals about how the mind and the brain causally interact, but yet they hold them being different.
Well, two things here is that, number one, again, even my own worldview isn't that they have to be the same. So, I mean, if you don't agree based on my argument that they have to be the same, then congratulations, you're still not disagreeing with me. I'm only saying that it seems likely, or at least there seems to be evidence for them being the same. That's one. And number two, I'm aware that there are alternative worldviews, right, for different possibilities of how mind and brain could be distinct but have causal relationships, but that's not what I'm looking for. I don't think that providing a possibility, right, is sufficient. Otherwise, my only argument that I would have had to provide in this debate is that there's a possibility that the mind and the brain are the same. What really makes an argument matter when we're talking about possibilities is the weight that those possibilities hold, and the weight of possibilities is derived from what can reasonably be gleaned from the evidence we have access to. So I would ask you, if you're going to bring up possibilities about how the mind and brain are distinct but have a causal relationship, then you're going to need to give some kind of evidence as to what the mechanism is for this causal relationship, if you're saying that they're distinct.
Okay, I think I covered one of the main premises that you had in that argument. I think I mentioned it before. Having an explanation is not necessarily better than having no explanation. I think we can both agree on that. And
yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah. Possibilities without weight are worthless.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure if you actually get what I'm trying to do, because I'm trying to show you why your argument doesn't imply the conclusion that you're trying to reach. And I don't believe that I also have some kind of like burden for me. When I'm pointing out that something in your argument is flawed, I don't believe that I hold the burden to actually show you a different kind of argument that shows a different kind of conclusion and argue about two like different points at a time, when the only thing that I'm trying to explain to you is your argument is a weak induction fallacy. Reason, you're giving me evidence for a causal weak induction.
Weak induction.
Yeah, so it's a fallacy when you're...
What's the weak part of the induction that I provided?
Okay, there is no sufficient explanation in the argument that you gave me, or any other argument that you mentioned so far, where causal relations entail identity relations, and you saying that it seems to be the case, well, I happen to see it very differently. So that's why I said this is an intuitive argument. In a debate, this would be...
No, wait. Now I understand the misunderstanding. You think I'm being intuitive because I said the word seems. Okay, when I said seems, I just mean that based upon the evidence, it's leading me in that direction. I didn't literally mean it seems that way in my head, so it's correct. That's not where I was coming from.
I understand that wasn't supposed to be the point. I understand.
And then again, it's not an entailment. The entailment of my argument is not that the brain and the mind are the same. That's just the way that the evidence would lead us based on the argument. That seems to be what's implied. But like again, I don't understand why you think that the induction that I gave was insufficient, because we both agree that the attributes that I listed, such as personality, morality, and emotions, these are things that we grant our mental states, our attributes of the mind. And then if it is the case that these things can be affected by physical events occurring to the brain, then that would seem to imply that these things are actually just processes of the brain, hence why the brain being affected affects these things. I don't understand why that's insufficient as a form of inductive evidence.
Okay, so, okay. I think I get that, but then can I just please have you, like, restate the position that you're trying to argue for? Because I believe what I clarified at the beginning of the debate, or we clarified, seems to be different than the evidence you're trying to provide me here. So can you just please restate the position?
Yeah, my position is that based on the evidence that I have, which is observing things throughout history, observing the ways that the brain and the way it's been impacted has had effects on mental states, the evidence seems to suggest to me that the brain is physical, that the mind is physical. It's like a physical process of the brain.
Okay, but then would you not agree that if there seems to be some kind of like request for information or further elaboration in your argument that I am asking for currently because I fail to understand the mechanisms, or I'm at the point where I'm just like in complete disbelief of this argument, do you not believe that you should do like a further explanation on it and just move out of this bubble on your position where you have this appears to be the case, this appeals to me?
I don't understand what the confusion is, because like if you're asking for the mechanism, it's like the hardware and software example I gave earlier. I would say that the hardware of our brain has software that we would call like mental states, for example, like our emotions, our morality, things of that nature, and that the software can be impacted by changes to the hardware. And so
I understand that's the causal relation.
That's a very simple way of understanding what the mechanism is. What I'm saying is that if you're going to provide alternative possibilities in which there is this causal relationship without it being akin to what I just described, without the brain and mind being one and the same, I think you need to give some kind of mechanism like I did, or else your view holds less weight by virtue of it holding less explanatory power.
Okay. Let me clarify this. In debates, the only thing we're talking about is what's within logic. We're not only and also, I mean, yeah, there's some parts about it where you can like make appeals to like intuition and stuff, but this argument basically fails at either of them. And that is why I'm having this confusion of trying to understand what you're trying to say. I don't believe that I hold the burden of having to give you like a different mechanism. I believe that what I have to do here is show you why I don't understand, or why that nobody will understand the explanation of this position. I understand.
I gave a very simple explanation. I don't know what the misunderstanding is.
Okay, can you just run me through this? Wait, just run me through this again. So
yeah, one more time. Okay. Yeah, one more time, right? I would compare mental states in the brain to be like that of computer hardware and computer software, where the mental states are stored within the hardware, aka the brain, and changes to the brain can change how the software functions, right? That's very simple. And then I also said that the evidence, the inductive evidence of how people's brains being affected seems to affect their mental states, would seem to inductively suggest that the brain is actually what's storing mental states, that mental states are just processes within the brain. And what I don't understand is A, how that's confusing, and B, why you don't need to provide, a causal mechanism for your alternative possibilities, because I think me, you, and everybody here would agree that explanatory power is very important when you're making an argument, and if your possibility has less explanatory power than mine, it holds less weight than mine. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay. I'm gonna just like go over this once again, because this is the argument that I'm giving you. We have our bubble of knowledge. You're saying that from this bubble, this is what seems to be the case. And I'm asking you, from what within this bubble actually justifies this? Because causal relations don't imply anything with the nature of the mind. They may seem intuitive that, they're related this way and that way, but that doesn't mean that they have like any kind of like identity relation to one another.
Can you quote any argument I've made that makes you think I'm relying on intuition? Because I'm seriously trying to figure out where the misunderstanding is coming from.
No, I think the intuition is coming from the fact that you're not giving me an explicit explanation as to why they have an identity relation or any form of like substance relation, if that wording helps so you like understand what I'm trying to say.
But if you think that I made an attempt to argue that position, then could you repeat back to me what you think my argument was?
Okay, your argument is this. We seem to have evidence that leads towards... Okay, actually, let me just like restate my notes on the point that you have. So we have a history of lobotomies and etc. And from this, we can conclude that brain states affect mental states. Mental states from this can be assumed to be a part of the mind because we can literally see the processes being like, I guess, affected by the brain being affected. That's my understanding of your point. And you're saying that because of this, we have a preponderance of evidence as to why we should believe that the mind itself is a property of the physical brain, or a part of it.
Yes, what are you not understanding about that?
No, I understand the position. I don't understand where the substance relation comes from them being like, in any form related to the physical thing. I understand that there's a causal relation. That is fine, but that doesn't deny them being non-physical whatsoever. That doesn't give a strong enough inference.
Hold on. So I'm not sure how it doesn't give a strong enough inference. If we're going to say that there's evidence that mental states are dependent upon the state of the brain, I would argue that that dependency gives us evidence that yes, the mind or mental states are physical, and that yes, they seem to have a relationship, and based upon how, I would argue, predictable this relationship is, because we have a history of lobotomies affecting people in very similar ways, because of how predictable this relationship is and how seemingly one-to-one this relationship is, I would argue that that's evidence.
Okay, no. You gave a good explanation.
Yeah. But to be fair to you, for all the talk that you did about intuitions, it almost seems like now intuitions are relevant because it seems very intuitive that what I just said, does satisfy my burden. I think most people would think that. So I'm curious why you don't.
Okay. Now, just please really concisely just restate the part of the explanation where you actually explained the substance relation, because you keep saying it seems to be the case. To me, it doesn't seem to be the case. I'm the only person you have to convince of this, and I don't believe that I'm being stubborn.
But why? If you don't explain to me why you don't think so, why you don't feel convinced specifically, I don't know what's going to satisfy you. Can you give me an example of an argument that would convince you of this substance relationship? What would that look like?
Well, I haven't seen one yet. If I had to, I don't know if I could come up with one on the spot, but I mean, if I'm saying that you have no explanation for this to me, and you're asking me for an explanation, wouldn't that just be applying some kind of like double standard?
No, that's not a double standard. Tensa, if you don't even know what kind of argument would convince you, then how is it reasonable for you to tell me that I need to give you an argument that would convince you? You don't even know
an argument that has no explanation. I know that it is not going to convince me. You gave a good... Okay, when I said that you have a good explanation, that means you made your argument understandable to me. I understand how it builds up. But when there's nothing to build on, there's no foundation behind that force. When there's no foundation behind the substance relation, I cannot make it up for myself. I cannot just go and make an argument instead of you that would convince me. And you trying to say that I have to make this argument just seems to be...
No, I'm not asking you to make an argument. I'm just asking you, you're losing me. What kind of argument, what would it look like for me to give you an argument that you understand, that you think is sufficient?
I don't believe that I have to explain it, but I mean, I'm saying that it's not that you have a bad quality argument. I'm saying that there's no explanation that suffices it. Your explanation is it seems to be the case. I cannot accept that when to me it doesn't seem to be the case.
No, but I'm saying that you don't even know what you can accept because you keep on saying to me.
No, I do know what I can accept. I can accept like any deductively or inductively valid argument. Any rational person would.
Then what would an inductively valid argument look like from me? What would that look like to you? What would convince you inductively of my position?
We have neurological proof that the mind and the brain states are intertwined, and they have to exist in, like, I guess, identical in substance. So there could be outliers. There could be people who have like fucking anomalies as minds. I don't know. But if we
Then why?
have
Then
statistics
why
that
isn't it? Why
shows
isn't
me,
it?
oh, in most cases this is the case, then I
But
would
then why
obviously have
isn't
to
it?
accept
Why?
it.
But then why isn't it neurological proof that when somebody gets lobotomized, they predictably act in a certain way, or that when somebody has certain brain deformations, they act in a certain way, or they act in an irregular way? Why is it not sufficient neurological proof that certain chemical imbalances? Well, actually, let me scrap that because that's highly contentious right now. But you get what I'm saying. We have mental illnesses, we have physical abnormalities, we have physical dehabilitations, all of these things which affect the brain and produce predictable results for how they'll affect people's mental states. How is that not sufficient neurological evidence for the mind states being dependent on and a part of the brain?
Being okay, that's what I was explaining all along. So we have all these different worldviews. No one denies that they're not causally related in some way. But materialism is a position that describes the nature of the brain. It doesn't describe the nature of the causal relation in between the brain and the mind. So what you're giving proof for is something not related to this debate, unless you want to go off some kind of like intuitive proof, which you don't want to go off of.
Okay, so again, you said that having inductive evidence based upon neurology, based upon that field of study, and how it affects mental states would be sufficient proof for you. But when I asked you, right, well, what about mental illnesses, physical deformalities, or sorry, I don't think that's the right word, but you know what I mean. Or how about like the fact that when or another one, like when a fetus is being produced in the womb, after a certain amount of months, after the frontal cortex is developed, there's a lot of scientific backing that that's around when consciousness begins to flourish. That those are the mechanisms by which consciousness can begin to truly flourish. Like when I give you these examples of neurological happenings affecting brain states, you just say, oh, that's a causal relationship. That's not proof that the nature of the brain and the nature of the mind, or that the mental states are dependent upon the brain states, or even a part of the brain states. It's like, okay, well, at that point, what form of specific proof could I give you that these two things are one and the same? What kind of evidence would even sway you slightly? Because I gave you all these examples that are
Force,
well known.
I think you're misunderstanding me.
What would it be? What would it be?
I think you're misunderstanding me. When I mentioned neurological proofs, my example specifically included the fact that in most cases it is the case that the brain and the mind are identical in substance, or at least seem to be identical in substance, but there could be anomalies, exceptions to that rule. What you're giving me as proof for them being causally related, all the examples about lobotomies, deformalities, whatever.
Not causally related. There's a difference between causal relation and dependency. Something being causally related means that we can draw some kind of relationship between two things that interact in a certain way, but we can completely discern like dependency from causal relations. I would say that there's a causal relationship between an apple falling to the ground and the existence of gravity. I wouldn't say that the apple. I wouldn't ever say that the apple's existence is dependent upon the law of gravity, because there are other things, there are other attributes of an apple that have nothing to do with gravity, such as its
Forks. Forks. I can grant that. I can grant that. No, Forks. I'm literally granting your point. I'm
going to finish.
I think you're sidetracking.
Genetic makeup, etc. So there are other things we could point to within an apple that prove that it's not dependent on gravity, because they exist in isolation from it. What I'm saying is that we have all of these attributes that we consider to be mental traits, and they all just so happen to seem to be in a completely dependent relationship with the brain. That the way that they function, all of these traits, seems to be determined by how the brain is structured and what the brain has been exposed to. That's no longer just a causal relationship. That is a
Wait, you lagged out. Can you restate the last part?
What? Yeah, I'm just saying that, as opposed to saying that an apple is not dependent on gravity because there are other traits of the apple that are in isolation, such as its juiciness, such as its color, such as its genetic makeup, we can't say the same as far as the evidence implies for mental states. Because of all the mental states that we've been discussing so far, not a single damn one seems to be unaffected by the state of the brain. It seems like the state of the brain can give us predictable explanations for the state of mental whatever, for the state of the mind, etc. And at that point, we're no longer talking about a causal relationship. We're talking about what seems to be complete dependency. That's different.
Okay.
Do you recognize that it's different?
Yeah, I said like I was gonna grant that dependency can be different, like I think like 7 times, but I was trying to tell you. That's why I said that you were just sidetracking this because you just like no, you just said this for like absolutely no reason because I don't think it changes my argument.
Is that not evidence that they're one and the same? If something's completely dependent on something else,
how would it be evidence?
Not evidence it's a property of that thing?
Well, my existence could be dependent on me being on Earth. I don't think that makes me identical to Earth. The brain states can be like evidence. I mean, the mental states. No. Force. Listen, Force.
Didn't cease to exist the moment he stepped on the moon. We know that's untrue and disanalogous. What I'm asking you specifically is complete dependency not proof that you're an attribute of something?
No, you can literally have, I don't know, like, bro, this is like so weird that you're saying this because this doesn't lead us anywhere, absolutely anywhere, because you're just not, okay, you're saying that we have evidence for X. I'm asking you, why does whatever you're claiming to be your evidence in this case, it can be like anything from lobotomies and etc., why does that lead to X? And you're just saying, oh, well, we have evidence for X, and now you're asking me, why is that not evidence? I'm telling you, dependency doesn't imply this, I don't want to say this pseudo-identical state in substance. And I've yet to get an explanation for it. That's the only premise that I'm questioning in your argument. I've granted everything else. I'm just asking, why is the evidence leading up to the conclusion?
Okay, really quickly to everybody in chat who's not understanding, my bad. I may have misspoke. I didn't mean that something that is completely dependent on something else is identical. I'm saying that if every single thing about you is dependent on something else, that's evidence that you are an attribute of that thing. That is all that I'm saying. We would absolutely...
one word, why?
So, okay, what do you think an attribute is? At this point, fuck it. What do you think an attribute even is?
But we said it would be like a part or a property of the brain. Isn't that what we said at the beginning of the debate?
No, I'm asking more general, broad, because I think that there's just a fundamental thing that's not clicking for you. What do you think a property is?
A property, okay. I mean, a property would just be like a part of something, some kind of like describable, I guess.
Yes.
Something describable in the nature of it. But yeah, that's what I'm asking you. Yeah, Force, that's what I'm asking you about.
Hold on, based off of what you just said, if you are a part of something, that entails that you are dependent upon it. You have a parasitic existence that requires that something else defines you. Is that disagreeable in any way, shape, or form?
Do you think that you would live without your internal organs? Do you think you would?
I think I would live without my internal organs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could conceive of several organs missing. I could conceive of those being replaced by something that allows me to continue living. Absolutely.
Okay, idea is because we don't have to get into like the highly theoretical shit. I'm trying to tell you that dependency doesn't imply that we have similar nature. I don't have the same nature as my fucking liver or my heart. Nor my lungs.
I don't think you have a complete dependency on those things. Those things can be replaced. Those things can be added onto in a way that makes them no longer just your.
Okay, but then how do you address the existence of a philosophical zombie? Like,
huh?
Okay, do you know what a philosophical zombie is?
Yes, I think that a philosophical zombie, right, requires the removal of the brain because the brain is what accounts for mental states.
Okay, so I gave you a counterexample to your argument, and your argument is just denying it in principle. I'm trying to give you an outlier in conceptions.
Because the evidence would suggest that the mental states, because as we just discussed, a property by its very nature is completely dependent on something. So if we're going to look at something like mental states and come to the realization that there's evidence that they're completely dependent on the brain state, then that is evidence that they are a property of the brain state. So when you bring up philosophical zombies, I would say, okay, well, in the philosophical zombie hypothetical, in which there are humans that are imitating the act of consciousness without actually having any qualia, I would just say, okay, in that hypothetical, there would be creatures without a brain and therefore without mental states, but they just have something within their nervous system that reacts to the outside world in a way that mimics consciousness. That is
okay,
fine.
So are you... yeah, no, because that... Okay, you're warping the idea of what a philosophical zombie is, and I don't believe this is actually addressing the idea behind it. You're
Yeah,
just
I
saying
think
that
your
it's a
understanding of
different thing
philosophical
because my
zombie
argument.
with a brain,
This entire
with no qualia.
no
Yeah, I
no
think
no 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 it has a
or a
brain.
conscious brain
That's
rather.
what I'm
A
telling you.
conscious brain, I should
No,
clarify, because you could have an unconscious brain.
that's
But
the
whatever.
that's the point. There's no like biconditional dependency between them. They have a causal relation between them. Or if you want to change it, they
No,
can
I
have
think
like you
I
can have the
agree.
mind
You
being
can have a
dependent on the
brain without
brain.
consciousness. You can have a brain without consciousness, I guess. I'm saying you can't have a consciousness without a brain. Actually, fuck it. I don't think my bad. I was looking too deep into it. I don't think the philosophical zombie actually really helps your case at all. Because in the philosophical zombie, I guess we could grant that there are things with brains that don't have qualia. That doesn't prove that the mind is not a property of the brain. If anything, that could just suggest that um yeah, mental states are there. That mental states do require brain. I would say.
It
That the
shows
evidence
you
points to this.
no. It would show you that there is no biconditional relationship to speak of, and it
I
would
don't think
show
there's
you that
biconditional
this
relationship at all.
dependency only goes one way. The same way my nails only fucking grow because
I
I
never
decide not to cut them.
asserted
That
there is
doesn't
a
imply anything.
biconditional relationship. I never said that the brain is dependent on the mind to exist. I said the
But then,
mind is
okay,
dependent
then
on
it's
the
just a
brain.
causal product. It's just a causal product, but that doesn't account for your argument.
What doesn't account for my argument? My argument never entailed there was a biconditional relationship. That there was a one-way relationship.
No. I assume that because of the principle of charity, because that's how I think the argument you're making would make sense. But if there's
No,
no
it doesn't
biconditional
require
relation,
that to make
no, folks, listen. If there's no biconditional relation and only the mind is contingent on the brain, then again, this fails to understand it. This just fails to give me an understanding of it. I'm just like completely No, I'm just genuinely like flabbergasted at this. Again,
What are
they're
you
running the same circles.
Okay,
No, they're running the same circles.
Stop
They don't
grandstanding.
have.
Just explain to me what you're confused about.
Okay. I'm confused because you're just saying there's a causal product. The mind is a causal product of the brain. It doesn't go both ways. So then, why it is the case that they are identical or even similar in substance? Where is that inference coming from?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't even understand what you're confused by. I gave you the proof, right, that there was a complete dependency on the brain from the side of the mind, in that all of the mental attributes that we listed, such as ethics, such as personality, such as emotion, all of these things and the state of their being seem to be dependent upon the state of the brain. And if every single attribute of something, such as the mind, seems to have this dependency, that is proof that it is a property of something greater, because we know properties to also have this complete dependency. So all I'm arguing is that the evidence seems to suggest that the mind is determined by the brain state. That doesn't require a biconditional relationship where the brain can only exist if the mind exists. That doesn't require that. I don't know why you think it does.
I understand your argument. I understand it. I understand your argument. One last, folks. I'm gonna make one last point. If you don't think, wait, folks.
I don't want you to posture. I don't want you to grandstand any more than you've already been doing.
I'll give you one more analogy. If you think that what I'm saying doesn't follow through, then we can just conclude after this. Do you think that like Sasuke's fireball that he shoots, do you think that is a property of Sasuke? Just answer me this.
That's the property of Sasuke?
Yeah. Do you think that the fireball is a property of Sasuke because it's a causal byproduct?
Oh my goodness. You're still not understanding my argument. I don't give a fuck about
the existence of the existence of the fireball and its ontology is just dependent on Sasuke, the same way the mind's ontology and properties are dependent on the brain.
Yeah, if it's completely
this is the same argument.
If every attribute of it is if everything about it is completely dependent on Sasuke exclusively, yeah, then that is a property of Sasuke. I'll bite that bullet. If that's how it works, I don't know. I'm not like as confident on things in Naruto, so I guess it's a little weird. But if it is completely dependent on Sasuke, then yes. Just like how the mind is completely dependent.
We can just conclude. I think this is definitely dishonesty at this point. Like. Okay.
What the fuck
this has to be dishonesty.
I don't get to bite the bullet and remain consistent when you say, well, if what you're saying is true.
I think you're supposed. I think you were supposed to concede this.
I was supposed to concede based on what?
Because it's a fucking fireball. He just creates the fireball the way he wants it.
If the fireball's existence is completely dependent on Sasuke exclusively, just like the mind is completely dependent on the brain exclusively, at least according to our evidence, then yes, it would be a property. I don't know why you think that me maintaining consistency on this position without you refuting the position in any meaningful way is this epic dub for you. It's really not.
Force. I don't want to say that this is an epic dub. I may be wrong. You also said that you may be wrong. I'm just gonna stay open-minded, but I think I've told you everything that I had to. I think I've proven like every single claim that I made. And I think we just had a bit of a misunderstanding, but I think, if anything, that's on your end. And this Sasuke thing, that was kind of like just a hidden heart for me, but I think we can just conclude this. I think we've been running circles for no point now.
Well, you can conclude if you want to, but I think that what everybody should make a note of is the fact that you grandstanded and postured about this Sasuke thing. I think it's very indicative of the fact that you don't have any substance to your argument, where instead of pointing out where I'm flawed in arguing that something having a complete dependency on something else, that makes it a property of it, you didn't really attack that. You just said, well, what if that's true with Sasuke and his fireballs? And I'm like, yep, then that fireball would be a property of Sasuke.
It's not logical proof. It's meant to be an intuition pump.
And then you just like pretend to be shocked and bewildered. It's like, if you don't have an argument, it's okay. Just be upfront about it.
Force. I admit there's no argument. There's no argument behind the fucking Sasuke analogy. That was meant to be an intuition pump. I think anyone who would debate this topic honestly would just agree that, oh shit, maybe I'm wrong.
So when you initially mistook my argument earlier to be an intuition pump, you critiqued it for that. But then when you make an intuition pump about this Sasuke thing for whatever reason, suddenly that's actually like a very valid argument for you. Really?
No, I critiqued the intuition argument that you made. No. I critiqued the intuition argument you made because you acted like as if it actually proved a position when all it does is give some persuasive power to it.
Okay, hold on. Then how does your weird intuition about, oh, you said Sasuke's fireball would be a property of him? That's stupid, according to my intuition. How does that actually get you any closer to proving whatever you're trying to prove? Explain that.
No, that's why I used it as an intuition, but you can use them as well. It's not that I'm like banning you from using them.
So then you're acknowledging that
it's just different when you're using it as logical proof, when I'm just using it for what it's supposed to be used for. I don't know about nobody. I can speak for myself, and I can speak for you, I guess.
So you acknowledge that you're just giving your opinion, because that's what your intuition is. You're basically just saying...
No. Both of us gave our opinions on this. That's up to the public to determine.
I don't really agree with you for it. No, I didn't just give you an intuition. I actually gave you tangible evidence that I cited throughout the consistency of this debate.
I'm talking about the Sasuke point.
What you just gave me on the Sasuke point, right, is just, yeah, in my opinion, Forks, that's wrong. It's like, bro, who cares? This is a debate, not like an opinion.
That's the point. Both of us just stated our intuitions, but one of okay, in the audience, someone's gonna look better from that. Someone's gonna look worse.
I didn't give you my intuition. I just remained consistent with the proof I already gave. You were just using your intuition.
Yeah, I know.
If you're just gonna use your intuition.
The thing is, you can always talk your way out of anything. If you're good enough debater, you can always.
Why didn't you just say in my opinion? Why didn't you just say in my opinion, Forks, you're wrong, and then we could have skipped this whole 35-minute session?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because in a debate, you're supposed to give logical proof. You gave yours. I'm giving you contentions to it. I'm using the intuition pump. This means to sway your intuition. The one
to my logical proof. You just admitted you're just giving.
I've given my logical proof before that, and I asked you about the Sasuke thing to sway your intuition towards one position in this debate. And I think it's really apparent, at least from what I've seen in chat, that people thought you were just completely wrong on this, and that you just...
Oh, so because
I don't know why you had to bite the bullet on it.
Because you have an intuition.
No, that's why it's intuition. No, that's why it's an intuition. But Forks, we can wrap this up. None of us are giving points on this anymore.
As much as people shit talk webcam parrot and Nairobi, I miss the days where debates were actually about proving something and not just about, well, people think that I'm right and I think that I'm right. Like, dog, why even have a debate if you're just going to give your opinion? In fact, earlier you were hardly giving anything.
I think you're misunderstanding me.
You were saying, well, in my opinion, Forks, I don't think your proof is sufficient. In my opinion, Forks, there are other possibilities. I was like, dog, prove that. Prove that any of that is grounded in reality, grounded in tangible evidence, and you never did. At the end of the day, this wasn't really a debate. I think you just wanted to give your opinion and have 30 people listen to it.
Nobody can.
No. You gave no. A debate is two opposing positions. You said the mind is material. I said it's not. You gave your proof. I attacked your proof. And then, when we didn't get anywhere through proof, I tried giving you the intuition pump as a last resort to maybe like give this like last chance for you to like change your mind. And if you didn't want to change your mind, that's completely fine. We can stop engaging now. Good debate.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
we can,
Thank you for your time.
Stop it. We can stop engaging. Thank you for your time. But this wasn't a debate because I had a position, you had an opinion, completely different things. It's cool.
It's cool if you think of it that way. I mean, I think most debates are actually
bad as well. I just want everybody to remember that Shinra's a fucking idiot. But you know, whatever. I think everybody acknowledges that. If Shinra wants to mic up and start talking, even though I've been carrying his fucking YouTube channel for the past month now, as well as his fucking server, and now this nigga's gonna dick eat me in a debate. That's cool, I guess. But Shinra, just remember, nigga, nobody's interested in your YouTube channel for you. They're interested for the debaters. Nobody's interested in your servers for you. They're interested in the other people with infinitely more clout and respect.
There'll be Tensa.
Realistically,
Tensa.
what I
There'll
reckon, the
be
streets are saying that
Tensa.
you guys went rel on JJK Inverse. That's what I've been hearing. So
We went rel on JJK inverse. You mean on the same debate where I have 70% of the votes in my favor? You think we went rel on that?
so you stabbed him then?
Huh?
So you beat him up then?
I did. Sorry, I thought you were Shinra. Yeah, I did beat him up on JJK. I beat him up on Jogo versus Choso, in which I won his fucking YouTube poll 65% on his own fucking YouTube channel, which is insane to me. But this guy likes to say that we went rel because Shinra's one of those people, one of those new gens who just talks, who just fucking rambles, who says, "Didn't you lose to this guy?" and then nothing else because he doesn't know what he's talking about and he just wants the attention. And I guess he's getting what he wants. You know, good on you, Shinra.
How the fuck you only get
Shinra, I would not.
votes
You know
against
what?
Shinra?
If Fulks, Fulks is
exactly.
that guy. Fulks is an argumentative weapon, so I can conceive of a world where he does beat you in JJK. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, let's see.
I can't conceive of a possible world where this nigga surpasses Tonwin. Holy shit.
No, that's too far, Fulks. You have to admit that's a bit too far.
Oh, you have forks.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, people sleep on Tanwan.
Oh, I was gonna say that you guys had like, wait, hold on. I think it was like a good discussion in the sense where you guys were arguing with good faith for the main parts. But I was gonna say that like when you were talking about inductive evidence, I think you meant abductive evidence, by the way.